Hello and welcome to this week's review of My Hero Academia. This week I'm reviewing the episode A Chain of Events Across the Ages. Just very quickly before we get into the review itself, it's still a little bit warm at the moment. I've got the window open, so if you hear any weird noises, that's where it's coming from. With all that said, let's get into the review itself and kick off this review, as we always do with these reviews, by talking about the positives. And the headline positives for this particular episode is that it has some great animation, some great vocal performances, and a decent look into the deeper history of the powers at play here. Now, in a grand change of pace, we aren't going to start this review by talking about the animation. No. We're going to start talking about the performances, some of which I should really talk a lot more about given my own personal history and experience, but hey ho, let's break the habit of a lifetime with these reviews. I'll be honest, I tend to not talk about the vocal performances with this series that much because, quite simply, I'm not that familiar with the voice artist names, so forgive me if I refer to them as being the person voicing whichever character that it is. It's just, I don't get a lot of time to do these reviews. I have to do them pretty bloody quickly so as to keep up with the old YouTube game. But anyway, one of the big standout moments for me was the part where Midoriya lands in the battlefield for the first time and just surveys everything that's unfolded around him. The sheer bloody destruction of it all, seeing everyone torn apart, maimed, bashed and bloodied, and this is all crowned off with him seeing Bakugo laying there, barely moving, twitching and covered in his own blood, and you get that moment of the performance, with the voice actor's performance, with you can hear just the sheer shock and terror and anger that's in their voice by that constant gasping for air that they're doing. It's like someone that's suffocating or someone that's drowning, just desperately trying to grab at the air to keep themselves just there and in the moment. They're surrounded, they're thrown into this deep, dark sea of pain and destruction, and now they have to deal with that fact. They have seen pain and suffering, they've seen the destruction of villains' attacks before, but this is the first time they've really had to deal with it on a personal level. They've never had to deal with personal destruction like this. They've never had to see a friend or a close associate of them getting torn apart to quite this extent. Nothing that this emotionally heavy has really hit Midoriya in his life up until this moment. The closest thing that they got was the moment when Tomura and the villains got away a few weeks ago in this timeline and previous season for us watching it. And the sheer rage and terror that radiates from him in that moment and thereafter is wholly believable, with the voice artist leaving little in reserves as far as that vocal performance is going. They're throwing every ounce of energy into that and everything thereafter up until the moment that Lemillion is there to calm them down and to bring them back into the moment and bring them back into focusing. We see that flare of the just turbulent, wild side to Midoriya that ultimately ended up giving rise to the Dark Deku character that we ended up seeing in the previous season, showing just how emotionally unstable that he can be, understandably so, given they're still a teenager and they're still all of this has only happened over the course of really about a few weeks, a month, so it's understandable they haven't had this major shift in maturity. So them to see all of this unfolding around them, to see someone who was at one point a very close best friend to be in that state and just it all boiling up and it's nearly exploding out of him and him needing to be brought back down to earth before he did something stupid and reckless and put himself in a position where he would lose. I think that's a brilliant moment, and it shows just how much the character has both grown but also not grown. It's something that was mentioned in the previous review that I did when we had the first episode of the mini-series a few weeks ago, which itself showed just how emotionally unstable that Midoriya could be at times, as well as what we've seen in the previous season with the Dark Deku stuff. And to just see this start to well up and it looked like he's going to go down that path again, and for him to even after the talk from Lemillion, still being in this state where you could see it behind the eyes and behind the vocal performance that they are only holding on by a very fine thread that's stopping them from going totally berserk in this moment. I think is brilliant. It's great marriage between the performance that we have at hand here, but also the animation itself, which we'll discuss in a little bit while shortly. Another moment I do feel that needs some credit is when we get to the part with Tomura trying to just process everything that's going on around him in this moment. Just how everything has just swung against him just so violently and quickly, and him trying to make sense of it all is brilliant. Yes, it lacks the vocal fire and passion and energy that Midoriya's performance has, because it's a wholly different thing. You can't compare them because it's apples to orangey stuff. However, it still sells the sheer desperation that is going on within his mind. That moment where he's just blaming anything and everything that he can do to try and understand it. Oh, it's because of all these heroes have worn me down. It's because I'm in this arena thing. Oh, it's just like a flying coffin. It's like an arena. What's this? It's like a child blaming someone else because they've lost a game or they've lost a sport. Oh, my controller came unplugged. Oh, I didn't hit the ball because the bats, look at it, it's warped. Look, he goes off an angle. Oh, no wonder I lost. And that makes sense given the character and just in what a fragile mental state that they are in, and just how much they have started to unravel over the course of this particular this little battle. How they've gone from this, yes, I'm going to take over the world and turn it into a new thing, bring about a new age, this almost manic, bordering on feral thing of him just trying to get his head around the fact that isn't really working for him and he's been caught on the back foot, and I think that is fantastic. Pivoting into the animation, the thing that I usually kick off the reviews talking about, I think that this is probably pound for pound the best animation in this season. It feels as though they've saved the entire animation budget for this episode, and seemingly for the next one as well, from what few flashes I saw of the next episode coming up. Didn't see that much of it, just bits of it by accident, but still, it feels as though we're getting into really the business end of this season, and we're really starting to get the good stuff coming through now. This isn't to say what we've had up until this point was bad. It frankly wasn't, as there were some really fantastic flourishes here and there, some really creative moments, some great visuals, and some decent action sequence stuff that we'd seen up until this point, but it felt as though a lot of the animation between those moments was rather workmanlike. It wasn't this grand production. It felt rather typical for television animation, or relatively speaking, bearing in mind that the quality of television animation can vary so wildly. But it did have a case of it just feeling rather standard for what you'd expect from an anime TV program. Even some of the best animated anime programs that I've seen over the past couple of years since getting into anime, the first season of One Punch Man, the past couple of seasons of Jujutsu Kaisen, yeah, they are brilliantly animated, but there are still moments between those great animated bits where it is rather typical, rather televisual. It's just in those particular cases, those moments were far rarer, whereas in this past season, up until now, those rather standard workmanlike, basic animated bits were a lot more common. Certainly it feels a lot more common than what we had in the previous couple seasons, but this week that is not the case. This week, aside from those little flashes of stuff we'd seen in previous episodes or in previous seasons, just about everything here was fantastic. It was presented brilliantly. The choreographing within the fights is brilliant. The cinematography in certain segments was fantastic to see. It all had this brilliant stylistic flair to it, which has been missing from so much we have seen up until now. Yes, there have been moments where we've got a hint of this, but this is the moment where it's all hung together and just been this constant thing throughout. And again, aside from little bits here and there, tiny little sequences, everything of this episode just was brilliant to see, with every move, every blow, every impact having weight to that, whether that be in the combat or whether that be in the more emotive moments, with it all having a visual dynamism that, when it comes to the fight sequences at least, it isn't just a bunch of people flicking around as they do in anime and just go blink, blink, blink here and there, and then a cut to people just going swinging their arms at each other and flashing lights. There is a sense of weight and impact and the feeling that there is an actual fight going on here, rather than just superpowered shenanigans so that we don't have to spend all the time animating people punching and kicking at each other. I will say is it does feel as though there is a slight shift in the way the characters are drawn and designed when we start getting into the meat of the episode itself. Something that evolves beyond just the stylistic for the sake of that particular action sequence or the sake of that particular creative sequence. It isn't a radical redesign, but it just may be reflective of who is leading the animation there. There's something that's different here that I just can't put my finger on, but maybe it's just simply the fact that we see Midoriya so rarely in this series that it's hard to get a grasp as to what he's supposed to really look like. But still, this isn't a criticism. It's just interesting that it feels as though, right, we're bringing people in, we're bringing in another animation team to head this up and to work with this, and they brought in a slightly different look to everything, which helps to add to this sense of we're in a new territory and we're going in a new direction, at least for the sake of the here and now. Maybe it'll start to be back into something that's a bit more familiar to us, but still, it looks fantastic. This isn't a criticism for me. I feel that the backstory information stuff that we get within this episode is good. I will admit that, given the title of the episode, I was expecting more. With a title like A Chain of Events Across the Ages, I was expecting this to be more of a deep dive into the backstory and history of some of our characters to some degree or another, which is something we don't really end up getting. We do get a little bit of something with the second user of One for All, and we do get bits from different characters here and there to help illustrate the facts in a more abstract way that this is the culmination of a chain of events, that this is characters doing this thing and this thing to spite One for All. Like you have the bit with the American fighter pilots helping Midoriya get to the land because of what happened with Star and Stripe a few weeks ago. It all makes sense that, right, this is the moment that the bad guys are getting their dues because they've successfully pissed off everyone, and now they've got to deal with that. It's just that with a title like this, you expect to be a lot more emotive. You expect to be more about a deep dive into the emotive history of one character or another. It does lean that way with Tomura, though. It does certainly get the hints of, right, we are leaning into that a little bit more with him and where he is, and this is again something that is reflected by the moment in the episode where he's like, no, I'm not the problem thing that's at fault, it's the arena that I'm in, and it's the other guys that's fault, it's not me, I'm super cool and awesome, as a child would do. And it's something, again, he's reflecting when Lemillion's talking about, yeah, this guy, earlier on when I mentioned about him having no friends, he just went off the rails, like, it's like a little kid took control of him or something. Like, again, it's something that the title is one of those things where talking about it always feels like nitpicking, but at the same time, it's one of those moments with an episode like this where the true significance of it is something I don't think we'll fully comprehend, fully appreciate till later on down the fact. And the truth of the matter is that a lot of the elements that it's talking about here are stuff that we've already had hinted to us here and there up until this moment. This isn't a negative, and it might sound as if I'm going into negatives, but I suppose in some way I've expected the metaphorical title to be more literal as far as the episode itself was concerned. So that would make it a literal metaphor, which, yeah, we're going into a very weird territory, so let's just pivot into the negatives. And I have to say is that I don't have many negatives, and to be honest with you, looking at the time and how much time I've spent on this episode, wow, this one's flying past. Anyway, what I'll say as far as the negatives are concerned, and this might seem a little bit of a nitpick, but I think that there was no need to do the flick to Shoto earlier on in this episode. You could argue that there's really no need to do the flick to anyone else in this episode from what everyone else is doing, because ultimately it doesn't add anything into this episode. And yes, by the looks of next week, we're going to start looking at different groups again, but in the here and now, there's zero need for it. It's like it feels as though, particularly in the start of the episode, oh, this episode is going to be about Shoto and Dabi again, and it's going to be time for their second and final confrontation. But we don't end up getting that. Like, I could understand doing something like this had this been the episode that we got to after a mid-season break. Like, oh, this is where everyone is. And, you know, given the fact we didn't have an episode last week, you could argue that it's worthwhile in that regard. But I think that the image of one of the most terrifying villains coming back is something that would have stuck with a lot of people a couple of weeks ago, so we don't really need reminding of it. And there's a part of me that's worried that when we eventually do get to this second round of Shoto versus Dabi, that we'll just get that moment a third time. When for me, the missing element in that whole sequence of events is the thing of him waking up. It's the thing of him getting up and getting angry. Like, I don't need to see this thing of him standing there surrounded by blue frames whilst the big cross thing comes off of him, because I've already seen that. I've seen that twice now. I want to know how he got up. I want to see the trail of destruction. I want to see the look of look of shock and horror that's on everyone's faces. That's what I want to see from this series of events. But we'll probably end up seeing that at some point, because I think that's the missing element from that series of events. We need that little flash of him waking up. We're probably going to get it. I hope we're going to get it, but we'll soon see about that. With that said, let us get into the overview, and I think that this was a visually exciting, dynamic episode with almost everything you could want from an episode at this stage in the story. I will have to say is I feel that there needed to be a little bit more emotional weight to it, which may sound odd given the praise I was giving towards the start of this review, given the vocal performances, but it feels as though there was just a certain element of it that was missing here that I just can't put my finger on. However, with that said, had they lent a little bit more into the emotive weight, that maybe that would take it away from the action, and I feel that at this point, we just need a good, solid episode of just out-and-out action at this point. Now, I am an advocate of emotion over action. I am someone that's far more interested in the emotional and personal stakes of our characters more so than the power level stuff of it all. However, with that said, we're in the big final storyline and everything's a big fight sequence. Having entire episodes dedicated to just a fight or two fights, I think is fine. As long as you then don't do that for 5 episodes in a row, because at that point I start to get worn out. But I do feel as though, given everything that's going on, given where we are in the story, we just need some really great action just to show us what the animators can do with this, just to let us see everything that's going on here. Maybe with a little bit of padding to help fill that out a little bit, because the timing of these things can be weird, but still, we'll see about where all that ends up going. With all that said, it's time for Comment Corner! It's time for Comment Corner. After everything's said and done, this episode will probably be just as long as any other episode. Oh well! Time for Comment Corner, where I read your comments and things you've had to say about the previous episode and just other random things to do with this series. We kick off with Big X1, who said, I love this one. Of course, this is referring to the last proper episode. But I think that maybe too much was happening, like you said. I feel that Dabi waking up should have been more of an important moment. Thank you for your comment. And just like I just mentioned, yeah, I think more needed to be done with that moment, quite frankly, as, yeah, it's a massive, massive moment there. Next up, we have Scott TV Gamer back again. Now, I'm not going to read out the fullness of the comment because we're starting to get a little bit on in timing, so I'll just go through the key points of it. The comment's on screen, so you'll be able to read it right now. When the previous episode came out, when it came out in the manga form, apparently there was a lot of people rather pissed off with it. The whole thing about Bakugo being revived, the stuff with Miyako getting knocked about in the way that she had done. With the stuff with Miyako, all I can end up saying with that is that I can see some people interpret it in that way, but I think that the other way to look at it is simply that, look, given the nature of the fight that's going on here, someone was going to get knocked about, and given that Miyako has become such a fan favourite character, regrettably, it was her turn to get knocked about a lot more. I suppose that had the big 3 characters been built up a lot more and had been more of a present up until this moment, they would have been the ones that end up getting that kind of treatment, which they kind of do, but whatever. The stuff with Mirio's Peach Seed and people thinking that it ruined their character. Hey, like I said in my previous review, that episode that they did this comment for, I'm perfectly fine with that, because it feels like more of a moment of desperation on their part, more so than it is something that's spoiling their character. It's them going, oh crap, I can't possibly defeat this person, and there's people around me who are dying. What can I do? I'll do a distraction. Hey, maybe maybe I'll do a video defending that at some point. I don't really know. And this stuff to do with Bakugo coming back, they say they never had a problem with them coming back. They just weren't exactly keen on the way that it was end up doing. And I'm fine with that. With me personally, I think that Bakugo being brought back and being revived is something that I think should have been pushed back an episode or two. Like, there should be more of an ambiguity of them trying to save him and, oh, can we do it, can we not do it? It looks like they're fading away. And then you have the thing with Edgeshot going, well, there's one thing that we could do, and then you get into the sacrifice thing. I think that needed to be played out a little bit more to give it the most emotional impact, but with a lot of things for this season, I think it is a case of it needed pulling out a little bit more, it needed pacing out a little bit better, but I suppose this is getting into the argument of adaptation with anime and manga again, which is a whole of discussion for a whole other time. We got a comment from Gertsai, and I'm not going to put the comment on the screen, I'm not going to discuss it because they are sharing their, I think it's fair to say, their dissatisfaction with the way that My Hero Academia series ultimately wrapped up. Now, I have not read the manga, I have not read that far with it, so I can't really comment on it, and from their comment, as soon as I realise, oh, they're talking about how this all it ends, it just, something's flicked in the back of my mind, just went, okay, I'll get the gist of it, okay, and then just leave a comment from it, and I can't comment on how well or not this series has ended, and for anyone who does, please don't spoil it in the comment section down below. Please don't, because there's a lot of people like myself who just watch it via the anime. With that said, how my feelings with this, at least from what I have seen thus far, is that my biggest criticism, and this is something I'll probably talk about when we do the season-long review, is just how events are paced out, how events are spaced out, like I mentioned with the Bakugo thing. And I think that a lot of this stuff that has happened or may not happen coming forward would have been a lot more digestible had it been presented a little bit better, had it been stuff that wasn't compounded into a single episode or so, or a couple episodes. I'm not going to talk into details because we're short on time, and his comment I will discuss when we do our season-long review. So, thank you for your comment. I'm sorry that I can't talk about it in greater detail because of spoilers and such, but hey, thank you for the comment all the same. And our final comment comes from UR9829, and it said, it would be cool if you put My Hero Academia clips in the background. I'm sure it would make viewers stay longer on the video. Great review. Thank you for your comment, and thank you for your advice. I'm sensitive to the point that these videos aren't visually interesting because, let's be honest, the little head bouncing about in the background, that was only supposed to ever be a placeholder because I'm having problems with my web camera, and it ended up becoming the main way that I do these reviews because it's very quick for me to edit. I do want to do something to make the reviews a little bit more visually interesting. I'm not sure about putting clips from the show in because, well, we all know just how zealous the YouTube content ID system can end up being. I'm someone who's been burnt by that in the past. I mean, without getting into a whole of a story, particularly bearing in mind how little time we've got left, a few years ago I did a video and me laughing triggered a YouTube algorithm thing, and it thought that I was using a sample from a Bangura song. So, yeah, if it can be triggered by me laughing and it thinking it's a very specific subgenre of music, then yeah, me showing clips of the TV series might trigger it a little bit more. There's other things I have in mind to make it a bit more visually interesting. It will take time to do it, and it's something I may work on during the break between the end of this series and the next one, but it's going to take time to do it. But anyway, we'll soon see how that goes. Thank you for your comment, and thank you everyone for your comments. Thank you everyone has liked and subscribed. Well, nothing else to be said, nothing else to be done. I'll just say thank you all for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye!
Thanks for watching. Be sure to like, favourite, subscribe, click the bell, and do all the YouTubey stuff that YouTube wants you to do. Go on, it'll do me a power of good. Until next time, my friends, goodbye!